Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Roseville City Council meeting of June 1st, 2022. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask our clerk to please read the roll.
Vice Mayor Haudeshelt.
Here.
Councilmember Alvord.
Here.
Councilmember Rakucci.
Here.
Councilmember Mendonça.
Here.
Mayor Bernasconi.
Here, thank you. I'd like to request that Vice Mayor Haudeshelt leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Ready? Salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to ask our clerk if she would please read the meeting procedures.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's City Council meeting. If you've not already picked up an agenda, they are available at the end of the staff table. If you're here to speak to an item not on tonight's agenda, you may do so under public comment. There is a 25-minute time limit for public comment with a 3-minute time limit for each speaker. As a reminder, the Brown Act does not allow council to take action on any items not on the agenda. If you wish to speak to an item that is appearing on tonight's agenda, you may do so at the time the item is heard, and you must stay within a 5-minute time limit. If you wish to address the council tonight, please approach the podium and direct your comments to the mayor. Speaker time limits will be monitored. When the light blinks yellow, you'll have 1 minute to conclude your comments, and when the light blinks red, you'll be asked to be seated. If you do address council tonight, we would appreciate your name for the record.
Thank you. We have one presentation this evening under 5.1. It's an update on the South County Transportation Sales Tax Measure. We'll be hearing from Mike Lucan, who serves as the Executive Director of the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. Mike Lucan, PCTPA. Thank you for having me back again. So tonight I wanted to make a short presentation or update on our efforts to look at a sales tax measure for transportation for South Placer County. Our hopes was to come here actually with a ability for you to approve an expenditure plan to put it on the November 2022 ballot, but as you'll see in the presentation tonight, we're not quite ready for that. So if we could go to the next slide. So I know a lot of you know who we are, but just for the audience and other things, we are a special district set up about 30 years ago to manage the city, the region's transportation planning and also funding for Placer County. We're made up of a board of directors, which is composed of a member from each of the city councils, 2 from the county board of supervisors, and 1 public member representing the entire county. So we represent the entire county except for the basin of Lake Tahoe, but I'm going to talk mostly about South Placer County tonight. If we could go to the next slide. So we have a lot of challenges as we implement projects, and they keep getting greater and greater every year. Not only are we a fast-growing community in South Placer, we have to provide all of the forms of transportation. So a lot of our work plan is related to roads as a suburban community, but we have a tremendous amount of transit and bicycle and pedestrian projects that we need to work on in the coming years. The state has decided to take a little bit of a different slant in terms of transportation projects. They've adopted the document that's on the screen there, the California Climate Action for Transportation Infrastructure, or CAPTI, which makes us take a second look at our VMT increasing projects like 8065 interchange and widening South Placer and some of our roadways, to combine those with transit projects and other projects like regional charging facilities and transit throughways to make those compliant with California's action plan. So another hurdle that we have that was adopted by executive order this year, but it's something that we'll have to slightly modify our projects. Well, I shouldn't say slightly. We will have to moderately modify our projects, but I think that we can comply with as we move forward. The other unfortunate thing with a lot of state policy is that there's no phasing out of the prior policy, which allowed both types of transportation projects, roads and transit. or VMT and non-VMT increasing projects. That is an immediate action that the state took, so that makes it even more difficult. And it looks like the federal government is likely to follow the state's lead on that. So whether we apply to the state government or the federal government for those matching funds for the money that we come up with, we're going to have to address those. And we have to redesign our infrastructure, so we have to add some things to it. But we certainly, there's only so much cost that we can bear with this in order to implement the projects. Next slide. So kind of restating our problem is that we have a structural deficit in transportation funding for South Placer County and for most of Placer County, and we're not any different than any of the other 58 counties. The only reason we're different is that we, unlike 25 of those counties, we're not what's called a self-help county, and that means that we don't have a means to fund the local share of transportation. But in South Placer alone, we need about $3 billion worth of transportation improvements over the next 20, 30, 40 years, including some of the projects mentioned already, transit and bike ped, and their associated project costs with those. And the way we fund that is that we fund primarily about $2 billion of that comes from new development. They pay their maximum fair share according to law to be able to pay for that development, as they rightly should. But we have about $1 billion to $1.2 billion gap of costs that we have to come up with as our local share because of existing development, because of pass-through traffic that comes through the region and the like. Next slide. And up until about 15 years ago, those impact fees really solved the situation, because in most cases the state and the federal government came up with 90% of the cost of the project, and we had to come up with 10%. And so those impact fees filled that gap very well. But about 15 years ago, it kind of became a different ballgame in that because of competition, not because the laws changed, but because we have to be competitive for this funding with so many agencies throughout the state and nation applying for these funds, we actually have to come up with half. So that leaves that very large funding gap of about $1 billion to $1.2 billion. Next slide. So as you know, we get a lot of questions about, well, what is this? We thought this thing called the gas tax was going to fix everything, and unfortunately, it only fixes half of the solution. And while we're trying to approve and get built a lot of new projects to fund expansion, we have to pay for what we have already. And so SB1, or the gas tax, funds public transit in terms of its replacement of vehicles. Vehicles like are used for Roseville transit. We drive almost 1 million miles until we retire them, so it pays to replace those. It pays for pedestrian safety. It pays for road and bridge maintenance, and then a tiny amount pays for congestion management. But most of that goes to the areas around our seaports at Oakland, Long Beach, and Los Angeles, and San Diego. It does not fund it cannot fund by law a lot of our improvements like the 8065 interchange, the 65 widening, or other projects around the South County. Next slide. So what have we been doing? For the past 4 years, we've been reaching out to the public and essentially explaining the need for this funding. And we've done this in multiple ways. We have gone out several times to check our expenditure plan. So we have that expenditure plan of $1 to $1.2 billion, and we this past year we had 15 community meetings throughout the county, not just in the south part of the county, but throughout the county. And at every one of those meetings, the attendees confirmed that our existing work plan, which focuses on 8065 interchange, widening widening 65, spending dollars on some of our arterials, spending dollars on our interchange, and putting a significant amount of money to the tune of about $167 million towards public transit, and about another $66 million towards bike and ped, that we should stay the course on that plan. That's been the plan all the way back to 2016, and those public meetings confirmed that the public would like us to stay the course with that expenditure plan. In fact, most of their comments were, "Why haven't you done it yet?" So So we also go out in the community through other means. You see up on the screen here some of the efforts that we've done, whether they're through videos, whether they're a kiosk at the Galleria, testimonials from local business leaders and other local community members, or meetings that we've had in the public. If you go to the next slide, you'll see a little bit more of those. We had this year a number of meetings throughout each of the South County cities, Lincoln, Rockland, and Roseville, to again talk about this and see what people's feelings are in terms of pursuing a transportation sales tax as a solution for South Placer. So if we go to the next slide, what we then do, and we've done this for almost 9 years, is after we do a public outreach, we basically see where we're at. Do we have enough support for a measure or not? And so we did another survey from April 10th to April 16th, right during the Easter break, if you will. And we asked the community in Lincoln, Rockland, and Roseville, and proportionally from each city. So we asked more residents of Roseville their opinion, because there are more residents of Roseville than Lincoln and Rockland. And we asked them, well, would you support a measure or not? If you go to the next slide. The first thing we do, however, we say, well, what are the other issues that are at top of mind of folks here at this point in time? And so we ask them about everything. You know, what are some of the things that are important to you? And as you can see, traffic and transportation is not at top of mind right now. We have a lot of things going on in the nation and in the community that are more important, those being inflation, gas prices, and the like. And if you hit the next button, it'll focus in on those top two, being inflation and gas prices. And I think if you hit it one more time, it will show you that we dropped. And that's significant that we dropped. We're usually in the top 5 issues in the county, but now we drop down to 8, 9, or 10 in terms of issues. It's still important, but it is not at the top of mind, and that affects people's overall opinion of this. If we go to the next slide. So where did we land when we read the measure? We actually got back to 2/3. So we got to the 2/3 necessary for a special tax on the ballot. But I would say, and I'll offer, that it is a soft 2/3. So we're there, but we're not quite there yet. Next slide. And that talks about the people that are leaning one way or the other. Next slide. So if you look at that in terms of context of where we've been, before the gas tax, we were up at about 75% in the South County. Then the gas tax went into play, and then we had, of course, the pandemic and the impacts of the variants and that kind of thing, and we dropped significantly. Well, we are showing a trend back in the direction of the measure, and it's simply a matter of traffic congestion. Traffic is coming back. We are at about 117% of pre-pandemic traffic right now on 65, and as that traffic comes back, people will likely feel it more, and as they come back to work, we thought here early summer, maybe it's going to be late summer now because of the latest variant. Those numbers are expected to increase. Next slide. So our projects, just to briefly mention, are the same. We have the interchange. We have to finish the next 2 phases of the interchange, about $450 million. Next slide. To replace what was, what is that clover leaf that is there now, and replace that with a large flyover structure. Very expensive project, the marquee project, if you will, in our expenditure plan. Next slide. And then the next most important project is the widening of Highway 65, which eventually will be 8 lanes to Blue Oaks, and then 6 lanes all the way up to Lincoln. And here's the first phase of that, which is the most the greatest need, if you will, for transportation, which is southbound 65 between Blue Oaks and Galleria. We have that project shovel ready to go, all the environmental permits, everything ready to go. Now we will likely modify this project a little bit to address CAPTI and look at things like transit priority lanes or HOV lanes. Instead of the latter phases, we're going to look at those at the beginning phases to comply with CAPTI. Next slide. Baseline Riego Road is another very important project, which I know you're intimately familiar with. Widening initially the baseline Riego, which has been planned for many, many years. The city and the county are collecting fees and implementing that project within the city and county, but we need to connect Sutter County to that, and we're working on a very important project to widen that to 4 lanes and then someday to 6 lanes. Next slide. Placer Parkway. A lot of folks say, well, do we need Placer Parkway? Well, yes, we do. It is, however, a very, very long-term project. It's a project that's going to take 40 to 50 years to implement. But as we run our traffic model, which is for the county, which is connected to the traffic model for the city of Roseville and Lincoln and Rockland, when you run that traffic model, if you don't have Placer Parkway, it fails, and traffic gets severe in the build-out of the plan. Now we're going to implement that over time, and we also recently checked that to make sure that, well, if we implement it phase by phase, it won't adversely impact roadways within Roseville. And we're going to have some data coming out in the next few weeks, but it will show that as we implement that in phases, it will not adversely impact intersections and the like in Roseville. Next slide. We have a lot of connections, and I won't go through every one of these, but really important projects like widening Blue Oaks over the railroad tracks that we have to do. Projects that connect us to our regional roadways. Next slide. We have bicycles. We have bike and pedestrian development, and we have a lot of projects to do in every one of our communities. Next slide. We have regional bike trails. You've heard this one a lot, I know, with the Dry Creek Greenway. This is our version of the American River Bike Trail right here in Placer County, and we're very hopeful to get this project funded. Again, a long-term project. The American River Bike Trail took 90 years to implement. Hopefully the Dry Creek Greenway doesn't take 90 years, but it is a long-term project. But a great project, a great regional trail that can be our version of the American River Bike Trail to get people to where they want to go without getting in a car and to recreate. And likewise, we want to connect all our communities, not just Roseville and the county, but all of our communities with bicycle systems, whether they be Rockland, Auburn, Lincoln, or Auburn. Next slide. And then our transit providers. If you go to the next slide, we have a tremendous amount of funding in the expenditure plan for those. A lot of it focuses on what we do well. Commuter bus service is a premier item in the expenditure plan. Certainly has to come back from post-pandemic lulls, but it is something that is very important to get people to where they want to go, and our plan is to expand as necessary that service. Next slide. And then we're going to try something new here in South Placer. The transit agencies together led a RFP for a new technology to do something called microtransit, which is what is now available in Citrus Heights and West Sacramento and in other parts of the Sacramento region, which takes you in a smaller vehicle directly from your home or business directly to where we want to go. And we're hopeful in the coming year or two that we're going to implement some pilot projects here in Roseville, Rockland, and Lincoln with microtransit. Next slide. And then lastly, another really important project in our expenditure plan is Capital Corridor. I know you're all aware of the third track project, which is to bring more train trips to Roseville. Initially 3 trips and then 10 trips per day to Roseville. We certainly have a long ways to go in terms of funding. We've been successful with a couple funding rounds, but we have to work really hard to get the dollars in place. And we went to cap recently with the vice mayor and others to try to solidify those dollars. It's not easy because we're competing with a lot of folks, but we're confident in the long run that we'll be able to capture that $200 million to expand that first phase of that project. And then the last project I'll mention tonight, excuse me, is the last project is we are beginning to look at a mega regional project. We're working with not only PCTPA and SACOG, but also the Bay Area Metropolitan Transportation Commission and San Joaquin Council of Governments to take a look at a long-term project, which is expanding rail from Roseville all the way up to Reno and Sparks. And we just started that project about 10 days ago, and we're hopeful that it will prove worth exploring and worth pursuing. We're working on this not only with the state and Caltrans, which has made it one of their priority projects, but the Nevada Department of Transportation and the Washoe County Transportation Commission have also come on board to support the project, as well as our other partners like Nevada County and the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. So very exciting project, but a very long-term project. So that, in a nutshell, is our plan. What do we do from here? We continue our outreach to 2024, and our focus is going to be on doing some of the same things, but doing them, focusing on the things that work better than other things. So in the past, we had focused on both general public items and also business public items. We are going to concentrate down to the general public who appear to have the least amount of knowledge about what we're trying to do. And so the community meetings that we had done several in the community over the last few months, we're going to expand those. We're actually going to do 36 meetings next year in Lincoln, Rockland, and Roseville. So really hitting each part of the community quarterly. And why that's important is because transportation planning and funding is complex. So you can't really explain, well, you need matching funds for these federal or state funds in a 10-second infomercial on Hulu or that. It just doesn't work. But when we sit down with people and we say, okay, this is, when we have a new transportation bill, it doesn't mean just the dollars flow down automatically and we get that. We still have to come up with 50% of the cost of a project. And we need those community meetings to explain that. So we're going to be doing that. We're going to be doing some of our streaming media. We're going to be doing some other stuff with social media, some events. We're working with we're hopeful to begin working again with the City of Roseville Parks and Recreation Department with them on some of their some of their events, as well as Lincoln Parks and Rockland Parks, and really getting the word out in the next 2 years about our efforts and the need for this. Next slide, I think, and that's it. And we are here for you. So if you have a question, a concern, or if one of your constituents has a question or concern, I'm here at all times. That's my phone number, my direct line. You can call me, you can email me anytime. And then my deputy director, Rick Carter, same thing. Email us or call us anytime. We're willing to sit down with anyone, anywhere, anytime, and talk about transportation. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
We might have a few questions for you. Are there any questions? Councilmember Auer, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, this year especially, I'm not even aware of an elected official in the county that is against the concept. It seems like the support is, we're hearing it from the constituents. I've been knocking on a lot of doors in Lincoln, and that is a major topic I'm just shocked that the numbers are that low when we haven't even started talking about it as elected officials yet, being on the ballot. I'm just disappointed that we're pushing it off because I just know it's something we need to fix and everybody wants it, it seems like. And I just worry if we get into more of a recession, if people will be more afraid down the road. But love to see it happen quicker. We need it so bad.
Thank you, sir.
Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, I'll just let Councilman Alver know all fair points and all points that the PCTPA board weighed very carefully, right? Because you get into that situation where congestion gets extremely worse, and then folks start to point fingers like, why weren't you ahead of this, right? So, all fair points.
Yeah. And thank you for your comment as the representative on PCTPA also. Any other comments, questions of Mr. Lucan?
Thanks for the update, Mike. No, thank you. But it's kind of like when you think of inflation and gas tax, that's really on everybody's mind. It's not that they don't feel that our transportation is important. I think they do. It just those two just kind of blare out there right now.
Yeah. We need to explain why, and that's why we're shifting our focus to more community-based meetings, because we have to explain why. Why doesn't this do this when we thought it was going to do that?
Mm-hmm. And you touched on this a little bit, but short of the self-fund component, what can we do for the next couple years? Will we see any redesigns or any work at all?
Yeah, we to the two projects mainly, because there are two greatest VMT increasing projects, to the 8065 interchange and to the Sr65 widening. I'll start with the widening. So the widening, the way it was originally set up was it was going to build the general purpose lanes first, and then the HOV lanes or managed lanes second. We need to reverse that. So we need to build those HOV lanes or maybe transit priority lanes. So when we have something like the South Placer Transit Bus, which Roseville Transit's trying to implement right now, it gives a priority to those. And then at the point where we have HOV lanes to connect to on 80, then we restripe, if you will, to them to be HOV lanes. And then the other project that we're just at the very beginning stages of is looking at a regional charging facility for light to heavy duty trucks near the interchange, and we just started working with Roseville Electric to take a look at is there infrastructure in the proximity to that? Are there parcels in that area that could be suitable to a larger charging facility, so that people that are transversing these highways have a opportunity to stop and charge at some regional facilities. So we're looking at that as one possibility. We're also working in concert with Yuba County on that project to look at a corridor approach to electric charging. So you'd have not only electric charging in Roseville and South Placer, but you'd have the next stop, which would be up 65 in the Marysville area. Beale Air Force Base has a tremendous amount of goods and services delivered to and from that facility. So we're working with Yuba County to possibly, and they're looking at a bypass of Wheatland, to look at maybe a regional charging facility up there. And so we're working, not only just with ourselves, but a regional approach to allowing people to use alternative vehicles that reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Thank you. Well, I'm sensitive to the position that you're in, because with all the data that you have with the polling, the public moves to whatever the shiny thing is. And, right now it's so many other things. And, you don't want to move forward with this monumental campaign unless you know that there's a great likelihood that it's going to pass. So I know that we all appreciate your update and your watchful eye over this too. And if the council doesn't have any other comments or questions, I'll open it up to public comment. Is that okay? Okay, so thank you for being here, and maybe just stick around in case there's any comments that come up. Okay, does anyone, I do have one yellow card so far. If Mr. Garabedian wants to come forward on this item, and then anyone else wants to speak to this item afterwards may.
Thank you, Mayor. Mike Garabedian for Placer County Tomorrow. I'm reminded about how back in 2021, that's when I got involved in these issues, the transportation issues, and so PCTPA would speak, and then I would follow back then. And I think a major thing that's changed now is that issue alerted people, and people know it's going to come back. So, and in my case, I've been following it and try to get involved in the PCTPA and SPARTA process, at least to follow what's going on. The polling that goes on and on is an expense, but so are the long-term expenses that are looked for. A major point that made before, and I don't think I need to repeat it again now, is that the studies show that congestion is not relieved when you add highway capacity. It may be relieved temporarily, but of course, the factor here are the tens of thousands of units that were proposed. Back in 2016, one count was that were counted 110,000 units in the offing at that time. So the study that's really needed, the public may have to do to look at alternatives and try to begin the process instead of continuing to work on the same old saw. The whole strategy here seems to be, I hope it's not the whole strategy, but it sort of sounds like the strategy is that things will get so bad that the people will want to vote for it. And this is really a pocketbook issue. Back then, as some of you know, the Republican Central Committee unanimously opposed Measure M, and the Democratic Central Committee it was moved to pass but didn't get the 60% needed. And I don't know that there's much of a change in that. The bill that was carried by the Speaker Pro Tem, I testified against it next to the main taxpayer organization in California. It passed to allow the vote in the cities down here in South County. Just a few kind of random points. PCTPA does have more power than many of the county planning agencies because it is a regional transportation authority, as I understand it, that gets to make its own plan. So you have that distinction of not being so dependent in the same way as those where COG is the Metropolitan Planning Agency. And this is the kind of thing that we think calls for creativity and looking very broadly to solutions. And I'm glad that PCTPA is not completely out of that. The public really needs to be better informed than the efforts that have been made, the kiosks in the mall, what they're hearing. I've been to a few of the meetings. They're getting a message that things can get better, and I think that's the main point to understand that it's not going to get better. One individual running for Board of Supervisors, when I was discussing this with him, he said his number one priority is Baseline Road. So now it's Baseline Road, and the process where each city works to get what its priorities in there, and each part does that, and the county, the people working together, and the developers. That's a log rolling process. I would say that looks how it looks like to me. I don't know if that can change, but I think something different needs to be done. I don't know if that's politically practical, but you and we need to apply ourselves so that the city is taking its genius, its approach, the kind of planning and work that Public Works does, the work you're doing on your trails and roads here is taken to PCTPA and Sparta to take a leadership role there. And maybe that's happening already, and I just don't know it. But I really see a need for that. So I'm sure you'll be hearing about this issue again. There are well-informed people of the public on transportation planning, more well-informed than I am, and I'm certainly no expert. But back in 2021, I was debating with another person against Supervisor Euler and the campaign manager for it, who lives in Rockland, and that was a lively debate. And maybe that's the kind of thing that we're sort of presaging here.
May I ask you to wrap up your comments? You're over your time, Mr. Garabedian.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought he still had 20 seconds, but I'm very glad to wrap up now.
Nope, you're over that much.
Okay.
Time flies.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone here tonight that would like to speak to this item? Okay, we'll close public comment. Thank you very much. We will move forward with the consent calendar.
All matters on the consent calendar are considered to be routine in nature and will be passed by one motion. There will be no discussion on consent calendar items unless a member of the City Council or staff or the public requests a specific item be removed. Mayor, at this time we do have item 7.13, the Senate Bill 1383 has been removed by Vice Mayor Hadeschelt. Are there any other items that the public wishes to remove from the consent calendar? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the consent calendar minus item 7.13 and approve the remaining items as recommended?
So moved.
Second.
Vice Mayor Haddashelt?
Yes.
Councilmember Alvord?
Yes.
Councilmember Rakucci?
Yes.
Councilmember Mendonça?
Yes.
Mayor Bernasconi?
Yes. So before we move on hearing that, it's removed, and we won't be hearing that separately. It's just, is it removed entirely, or we're going to hear it
No,
separately?
we're
Okay.
hearing it separately.
So let me just pause for just a second, because I want to open up public comment for any item that's not on the agenda. I skipped over that before. So is there anyone here tonight that would like to address the council on any item that's not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment, and then we'll move forward with the item 713.
Yeah, and thank you, Mayor, and fellow colleagues. You know, what first struck me as I was looking at our consent agenda was we're being asked to adopt an urgency ordinance. And in my mind, an urgency ordinance, which would be effective today, certainly needs further explanation. And so I appreciate the fact that Devin and Michelle White are here to explain why, what the municipal ordinance does when it says repeal and amend, and given that 1383 and the organics diversion was front and center in recent flow agreement discussions with the material recovery facility, felt this needed an airing rather than just on consent.
Right,
Okay.
I'll kick it over to you both. Thank you for being here.
All right. So I'm Devin Whittington, Assistant Director of Environmental Utilities. This is Michelle White. She is our Compliance Administrator for the Waste Services Division. And so we're going to go ahead and start out with a little bit of background so you kind of see where we're going. And we're going to talk about SB 1383 specifically. So SB 1383 was approved in 2016. And then final regulations were adopted in 2020. These regulations will require jurisdictions such as Roseville to divert 50% of all organic waste by 2025 and 75% after 2025. The regulation also requires that jurisdictions like Roseville adopt an enforceable mechanism, and in our case, that is the municipal code in front of you this evening. The reason for the urgency on this issue is because there is $193,000 available to the city if we execute this ordinance before June 14th. Another reason for the urgency is, Bruce, you mentioned WATMA, Western Placer Waste Management Authority, and the flow control commitment. We had to have a defined collection system before we could proceed with the ordinance. We've been working on this since last year, but until that agreement was solidified, we weren't able to move forward with this ordinance. So that's what's kind of pushing us into this urgency. And again, the urgency is just to capture that $193,000. We can use that for procurement requirements from SB 1383 and other implementation with SB 1383, such as containers or anything we need in the future. The ordinance this evening does not contain a collection system change, so it does not have a transition to a 3-container system. If we move forward with a 3-container system, that will come to council at a later date, and we will have that discussion, and we will have to revise the municipal code again at that time. So with that, I open it up for questions.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, so first of all, I missed the 193,000 in the council communication. I didn't see it there. That certainly is an incentive to move forward and not miss an opportunity to get non-ratepayer funding. Just a couple of questions. So there are 2 tiers. And the first tier involves, I'll just generally lump them in, they're edible into the large grocery store category. Are we already doing that?
Yeah, so I'm going to partially answer this question, and I'm going to defer to Michelle. So the Tier 1 customers that we're dealing with, those are, you think of large grocery stores, things like Costco. And really what we're doing as a city is we're just connecting the Placer County Food Bank with these entities and kind of being the liaison between both of them.
Okay.
So we're just setting that up, and that's how we're going to meet our edible food recovery goals. Since we're not really experts, in waste collection at what is edible food and what's not, we typically collect things that are spent. So
when the lettuce is past its, goes, okay.
So let me pause you there. So lettuce is past its expiration. You call the food bank. Then what?
So if it's past its expiration, it would actually go into the organics collection container, and it would be taken to composting at this point in time. So edible food are things that are not expired, canned foods, things like that can be recovered, and then the food bank takes those and redistributes them into the community.
I want to clarify that.
Yeah, that's a great clarification.
Okay. Any other
Yeah,
questions?
so tell me about the education, and so, because this has been, Tier 1's been a requirement since January 1st of this year?
Yeah, so we've been working with the Tier 1 customers since 2019. We have another individual that's not here today, that's an organics coordinator. That's our field person, actually goes out and meets with these businesses on a one-on-one basis and then creates that connection between the Tier 1 customers and the Placer County Food Bank. The state does not intend to enforce any of these type of regulations until 2024 with the edible food recovery. So there will be additional outreach at that time. We also have a link on our website that goes directly to the portion related to edible food recovery.
And then the rate study that's referred to in the council memo, those rates have already been built into, or are those rates that are coming down the road?
So we're going to have to redo our organics rate structure. Our organics rate structure was put into place in 2016 when we implemented AB 1826. AB 1826 is a commercial organics recycling requirement. SB 1383 takes it down a step further, so we have to redo those rates again and basically go through the whole process.
And what was puzzling to me is I'm used to seeing legislation with red line, strike, and amend. And, until I got way late into the ordinance, I didn't see any new language in here. So it was hard for me to decipher, what was new and what wasn't new.
So it's a very boilerplate agreement that is basically getting us the bare minimum needed for us to qualify for those grant funds. Okay. And again, there'll be a later version of this probably coming in the next few years that will have more detail.
So question for Michelle. So there are rates in here.
No rates.
Well, in the ordinance there are rates.
So
those are existing rates from our last rate study. Those are not new rates. Our new rate study will be kicking off here in the next few months, and that would be another
rate
update.
That goes from 2020. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, those were approved by council last year.
Right, and so we'll just amend that ordinance to, Michelle will just amend that ordinance for the new rates when
they come before you. So you have two chapters before you, 912 and 917. 917 is in a red line strikeout format. 912, when we started doing the red line strikeouts, there were so many red lines and strikeouts that it was very difficult to read. So we did a repeal and replace. So you look at this as if it's new, but not all of it is new. The rates are not changing. Those are on our existing code. A lot of the changes were definitional in nature, enforcement in nature, as he mentioned, things that really actually weren't too substantive, but were required by the new regulations.
And then my last question is, are other jurisdictions doing this?
Yes, so every jurisdiction that has to comply with SB 1383, so that's anybody that's not a rural designation, so a population above 70,000 is required to have this municipal code update in their ordinance.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions of staff?
Maybe just a comment. I agree too. I saw it, Bruce, and that was the first thing I said. We got to talk about it a little bit. And I'm glad we did because it just clarifies what we're doing and making sure that we're meeting the compliance of state regulations, and that and we may be able to again take an opportunity of gaining some money that we can use to put down rates and things that would cost us in excess, because we'll get this, maybe get the $193,000. I never say anything unless you get it, you know. But it's, I feel that it's good that people know that this is something that we've been working on a long time, and it's, and where it is right now, and as things change or anything that we need to have occur will come back to us.
And I think you said this, Mr. Whittington, but it's in our memo, and I just want to underscore it. This does not change our bin collection system. Anything like that will come back to us at another date and time, right?
That's correct.
With that, Mayor, I'd move approval of the,
Okay, let me open it up to public
yeah,
comment,
okay.
and then we'll take a motion from you. Is there anyone here tonight that would like to speak to this item? No? All right, seeing none, I'll close public comment. Thank you for answering all of our questions. We appreciate your time this evening. And do you want to start a motion, Vice Mayor Hadashot?
yeah, I would move that we adopt an urgency ordinance repealing and replacing Chapter 9.12 of Title 9 of the Roseville Municipal Code and amending Chapter 9.17 of Title 9 of the Roseville Municipal Code to conform with the requirements of Senate Bill 1383, short-lived climate pollutants, and Cal Recycles Organics Regulation. I'm not going to read the rest of that. And declaring the ordinance to be effective June 1st, 2022 as an urgency ordinance. How'd I do?
Thank you.
All right.
Second, if you did it, it looks like you did it right. That's good.
Vice Mayor Hadashelt?
Yes.
Councilmember Alvord? Yes. Councilmember Rakucci? Yes. Councilmember Mendonça?
Yes.
Mayor Bernasconi?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we have one public hearing this evening. It's item 8.1, the Sierra Vista Specific Plan JMC Tentative Map Number 4 General Plan Amendment, Specific Plan Amendment, Rezone and Development Agreement Amendments. I will open the public hearing and turn it over to staff for their presentation. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Bernasconi, members of the City Council. I'm Greg Bitter, Planning Manager with the Development Services Department, and I'm here tonight with Shelby Maples, our Associate Planner. Shelby's going to provide you a presentation regarding entitlements that are associated with a variety of land use and zoning amendments on properties controlled by JMC within the Sierra Vista Specific Plan. So I'll turn it over to Shelby now.
Thank you, Greg. Good evening, Mayor Bernasconi and council members. I have a presentation for you on the JMC project known as Tentative Map Number 4. The proposed project affects several large lot parcels in the Sierra Vista Specific Plan area. The requested entitlements will facilitate the development of 516 single-family residential units on the CO parcels, which are shown here on the western side of the plan area along Santucci Boulevard. And the project also includes land use and zoning modifications for those other parcels, FD 24, 32, and 41, JM1 and JM20, and DF 20. The proposed project includes a general plan amendment, specific plan amendment, rezone, and development agreement amendments to facilitate that project. Additional entitlements, including large and small lot tentative subdivision maps and a design review for residential subdivisions, were approved by the Planning Commission on April 28th, 2022. The project general plan amendment, specific plan, and rezone will adjust the land use boundaries between the parcels, as well as complete unit transfers throughout the plan area. This will result in a net transfer of about 27 acres from low-density residential to medium-density residential, decreasing the low-density units by 197 and increasing them by 223 medium-density units. High-density land will decrease by nearly an acre and gain 14 units, where community commercial parcel FD41 will increase by approximately half an acre, remove its mixed-use overlay, and transfer its 40 allocated units. The rezone will align with the boundaries for the land use changes, and overall, the units for the plan area will remain the same. The project also includes a few other modifications to the specific plan, including changes to the affordable housing allocation. So 38 middle-income purchase units will be transferred to new parcel FD32B, which is a high-density residential parcel. And these units will be converted to 19 low and 19 very low-income rental units. So this will further reduce the city's deficit of units in this housing type, providing a benefit to the city. And finally, the project is also modifying the specific plan to allow private gated subdivisions on several parcels throughout the tentative map. The project also includes amendments to 3 development agreements within the specific plan. These changes includes updates from the project as well as updated language regarding well construction and recycled water facilities. For the DF Properties DA, the affordable housing language will be struck as the project transfers out the last remaining affordable housing allocation in that DA. The Federico Development Agreement will be updated to show the addition of the 38 affordable units and show that those units will be converted to 19 low and 19 very low income units. Finally, the Conley DA includes a change to the fee language for the parks and bike trail fees. These fees are calculated based on density, so low-density units owe higher amounts than medium and high-density units. So the land use changes proposed by this and prior projects have resulted in a shortfall of funding for these programs. So staff and the applicant negotiated language for one-time contributions, which will be paid to the city prior to or concurrent with the recordation of the final map for CO1. So the payment of these fees were always a requirement of the development agreement, so the modification will clarify the timing and reflect the updated fees due to the current and previous land use changes. Overall, the development agreements are consistent with the general plan, specific plan, and zoning ordinance and will not affect public health, safety, and welfare. Early notification of the project was posted to the Arcona website, as were notices of the project hearings, and notice of the Planning Commission hearing was mailed out to all residents and property owners within 300 feet of the affected parcels. No comments were received on the project. The project was heard by the Planning Commission on April 28th. There were no public comments on the project at the hearing, and the majority of the discussion centered on the bike trail and parks fee payment language that was added to the DA. Ultimately, the Planning Commission approved the large and small lot tentative subdivision maps to create tentative map number 4, as well as the design review for residential subdivisions entitlement. The Planning Commission recommended that the City Council approve the project's remaining entitlements. In conclusion, the Planning Commission found that the project is consistent with the goals, policies, and standards of the General Plan, Sierra Vista Specific Plan, and Zoning Ordinance, and that the required findings for each entitlement can be made. In addition, an addendum to the Sierra Vista Specific Plan Environmental Impact Report was prepared to evaluate the proposed project, and it was found that there were no new or more severe environmental impacts. Therefore, Planning Commission recommends that the City Council take the actions listed here. Thank you, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Do any of my colleagues have any questions of staff? Any questions? No. Any questions from over here? Okay. I'll open up to public comment. Is there anyone here this evening that would like to comment on this item?
Mayor Bernasconi, council members, Chad Roberts at Hefner Law on behalf of the applicant. I want to thank Greg, Shelby for your presentation. I certainly don't need to repeat all of that, but thank you very much for your hard work on the project. We're happy to be here this evening, happy to answer any questions you might have. If not, we would respectfully request you to approve the staff recommendation and Planning Commission recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment and bring it back to the council. Are there any other further deliberations before we have a motion? We know you spent a lot of time on this, and we've had outreach from the developers as well. Anything?
I think that the community not having any feedback at all is an important element for us to consider, and I do appreciate the growth of the commercial section down there on Market. This whole community is in the growth. You know, everybody wants commercial. I know that's going to be quite a ways off before it actually develops, but I'm supportive of the idea. I think it's a good idea.
Maybe just a question to ask you. I see you have some gated communities, but they didn't have any in this particular plan before that, and they added some? Can you tell me about the?
Yes, so there were already several of those parcels that are on the tentative map 4 are already shown as gated communities. So this will be adding 3 parcels that will be gated, 3 large lot parcels, sorry. But CO2 and CO1 are connected, so that will function more as a single gated community. But yes, I believe there were already 2 of the subdivisions were already shown gated in the specific plan.
Okay, I just was kind of, wanted to see how many there were. I think having a few are okay. I just like to have things particularly open for, working with bike trails and just feeling as part of community. That. Okay. Thank you.
Anything else before we have a motion? Okay, does anyone want to start us off?
Oh, yeah, I was going to ask Vice Mayor Howdeshelt to read this one, too. The motion is to consider the addendum to the Sierra Vista Specific Plan, EIR, adopt resolution number 22191, amending the general plan to change the land use designations on certain real property in the city of Roseville, adopt resolution number 22-192, amending the Sierra Vista Specific Plan, introduced for first reading an ordinance of the City Council of Roseville, amending zoning ordinance number 5428 of the City of Roseville, changing the zoning of certain real property located within the City of Roseville. Consider the 5 findings of fact and introduce for first reading an ordinance adopting the Second Amendment of the Development Agreement by and between the City of Roseville and SV 218 LLC relative to the Sierra Vista Specific Plan and authorizing the city manager to execute it on behalf of the City of Roseville. Consider the 5 findings of fact and introduce for first reading an ordinance adopting the Second Amendment of the Development Agreement by and between the City of Roseville and Moyer Investments LLC relative to the Sierra Vista Specific Plan and authorizing the city manager to execute it on behalf of the City of Roseville. And consider the 5 findings of fact and introduce for first reading an ordinance adopting the Sixth Amendment of the Development Agreement by and between the City of Roseville and SVC2 LLC relative to the Sierra Vista Specific Plan and authorizing the city manager to execute it on behalf of the City of Roseville. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Vice Mayor Howdeshelt?
Yes.
Councilmember Alvord?
Yes.
Councilmember Rakucci?
Yes.
Councilmember Mendonça?
Yes.
And Mayor Bernasconi?
Yes. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll do one last public comment. Is there anyone here this evening that would like to address the council on any item that's not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment, bring it back to the staff. Do any of our staff have any items to report out this evening?
No further reports, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And any council comments?
I just have a couple. One that, we just had a few days ago here in Roseville, we had a Memorial Day service at the Roseville Cemetery that was quite nice. They had the musicians from City of Roseville's band, and a lot of people were present, and they had the Gold Star moms there too. So it was a very, very touching ceremony, and I think it brings back in our face Memorial Day when we had Sergeant G recently be killed, and that was also mentioned. Mayor Bernasconi and Councilmember Mendonça were there also, and also our supervisor, Bonnie Gore, was there. And they had the speaker that was there was a Marine veteran, and he was a Roseville High graduate. So it was very nice. And then I'm on Northern California Power Association. They have meetings, and we try to have meetings in some of there's many cities that are involved, and one of the cities was Hillsburg, and they had the meeting there, and we were able to see how they deal with their solar panels, and they have solar panels on their wastewater treatment plant, and they're in two big ponds, and they call them they're literally their water farm, and land is very expensive in Hillsburg, and they decided to do it this way, and it provides a lot of different things. It's solar, and it's on 14 feet of water in both those ponds. One pond was totally empty because we're in a drought, and so you don't always have wastewater as much as you had. But they put the solar panels to create electricity, but also to cover the water, and it seemed to reduce the algae there. I've not ever seen that done. Apparently, it hasn't been done in the United States, but it's done a lot in Asia. And so that was real interesting. And they use that water for their vineyards. And so their vineyards some of the vineyards are being using the reclaimed water. Where here in Roseville, we have reclaimed water, and we use it for our landscaping and our parks. And we have our energy park that has the solar in it. And then I'm just going to also mention something. We're in a drought, and we have nice hot weather right now, but there's so much tall weeds around town. Just be real careful. A lot of times you remember what your front lawn looks like and your backyard looks like, but behind your fence, your wooden fence, tall grass, it's really easy to have fires, and it doesn't have to take a lot to start something. So, And also, if you want to have a dry lawn, that's okay, but maybe you want to mow it too, so it's not 3 foot tall. So it's just a not only an attractive nuisance, it's just dangerous, and just one of those things you kind of forget about. But it's really easy to have a fire. So the second thought on that.
Thank you.
Just real quick, I had the opportunity last week to attend the ribbon cutting with Councilmember Alvord and the members of the Roseville Chamber of Commerce to welcome one of Roseville's newest businesses, Lush Balloons. They're located on Junction and Washington, right next to the Arco gas station there on the corner, adjacent to the police station. They selected Roseville. They were trying to get a second location. First location opened up in Sacramento, and we were able to accommodate them and get them helped with a location and set up here. So a big shout out to our folks at the city that helped expedite that process for them. I think they're going to be great. They do a lot of balloon arches and things for parties, indoor and outdoor, and they plan in the fall to expand into a a venue, an indoor venue, kind of like a hall or a event venue. Probably 100 to 150 people can fit in there with chairs and everything. So really glad to see them come on board and welcome them to Roseville. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Hadashout?
Yeah, tickets are still available this Friday night for the inaugural event of the Placer Breast Cancer Foundation Dinner in the Orchard up in Newcastle. Penryn, Newcastle. Weather's going to be great. Yeah, go to placerbreastcancerfoundation.org for tickets. We're going to have a little promotion ceremony on June 8th. Our Roseville PD will be after a couple of years recognizing and doing a promotion ceremony. There's a lot going on. That's enough.
There is. Yep. Councilmember Alvord?
I got to meet the Placer County Economic Development Director, the new one, Gloria Stearns, and she's going to be a nice addition for the county. I think she's got a good vision, and looking forward to seeing some of the things she does at the county Center for Economic Development. Also, on the 21st, I attended the Placer Pride event at Royer Park, and it's pretty refreshing to see county services out there and our city services out there and our police chief and some of his staff walking around. It was pretty welcoming event, I think, for the community. And then I had the honor of being a keynote speaker for the Teachers Who Make a Difference event. And it was really touching being in a room with a bunch of leaders throughout our whole county. Every single school in our county, K through 12, they had teachers, and their administrator came. And the stories of the different teachers and what they do for their class and how they make a real difference for their students, it's really uplifting, and no wonder we have such a fantastic education system here in the region. And I just wanted to do a shout out for those teachers that won awards that night. We so appreciate you. You do a great job for our students, and thank you.
Thank you. I just want to once again offer our appreciation to the staff for our budget workshop meeting last night. I see we have our CFO in the audience, and to our city manager. We were here for a few hours last night, and we will vote on our budget June 15th. If the public has any comment that they wanted to provide, that there's really great highlights in there. Some of which we're excited about when it comes to our police department. So we want to thank our city manager for helping to make that happen. But Roseville's in a really good spot, and I know all of us here are proud to be able to serve our community. So that will be June 15th. So happy June, everyone, and I would like to just adjourn the meeting and see you back here June 15th. Thank you.
Oh, man.